Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Well, happy Valentine's Day. It is cold in Houston, Texas today, and we are soft Southerners and we are not used to it. Category 5 hurricane, we're fine. We might put on some galoshes, but the temperature drops below 32 and we really lose our minds. I saw this on Facebook. It said, "To all my northern friends, your weather is down here in my backyard drunk. I'm going to need you to come get it." Well, on this cold, gray, very cold morning here in Houston on this Valentine's Day, how fortunate for us that we are on part 2 of our love series. To Live in Love is the name of our series. And last week we talked about storge, which is familial love, the love of our parents, brothers, sisters. And we expanded that to think about the way we can love our human family. Without having to see everything all the same or agree on every detail, we can move forward in love with one another. Today, we're talking about Eros, passionate love. We'll come back to that in a minute. That'll warm the cockles of your heart on a February morning. Next week, Reverend Jean Marie will be speaking on philia, which is the love of friends, friendship, chosen family. And then Reverend Sheila and I are going to tag team on February 28th, speaking about agape, the unconditional love of God, as we also celebrate the culmination of our Black History Month celebration. So that's what we're about. So let's come back to this idea of passion, romance, eros. You know, I've been saying that these are the Greek words used for love, and in English we only have one word, right? Love. Sometimes we have sort of love light, affection, or something like that, but this is different. And I have been saying that these are the words used in Scripture. Well, I have to stand corrected. There is no use of eros in the Scripture. I think they were afraid of it. Because it's got some power, this eros, passion. Now, I want to say that in the Hebrew Scriptures, in the Song of Solomon, it was written in Hebrew, not in Greek, but there's some eros in there. Some passionate, even dare I say, sexual love and imagery. It's a part of life. C.S. Lewis, in his wonderful book, which I've been studying to sort of inform me as I come, I'm not really teaching out of his book, but I am enjoying reading it. It's called The Four Loves. And what he says about eros is that he maintains that really the storge, the familial love, is the most rooted in nature, in our biology. But there's no doubt that eros has some connection to biology as well. But what he said is that we are able to completely divorce the sexuality, the sexual act, from love. And that's true. But today, I'm going to be speaking less about sex and romance, although I have been thinking about this. Back in my old church yeah, I've been thinking about it. Back in my church in Dallas years ago, my mentor and minister, Reverend Dr. Petra Welda, she did a talk called Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex and We're Afraid to Ask. And this is back in the day we sold tapes of the Sunday service. We sold more copies of that Sunday talk than in all the years we were doing ministry together there. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I was thinking about this idea of passion and eros, the Greek word for desire. And I remembered an article that I had read years ago. It was an interview with the wonderful poet Oriah Mountain Dreamer. It was an article in the Science of Mind magazine. And she said this, and it has always stayed with me. I don't remember anything else from this interview, but she said this: "I believe that sexuality, creativity, and spirituality are 3 faces of the same thing within us." That has always just rang so true for me. that there is something about this desire for experience and expression and connection. It's just our soul. It's who we are. And we have these different avenues of exploring and expressing this kind of experience, this kind of love. And I believe that is Eros. This desire, this passion. So that's going to be my focus today, and I'll be speaking more on the creativity and the spirituality aspect. I'm going to leave, what we like to say, Unity does not have a lot of rules when it comes to sex and the way you conduct yourself. We really believe it, just harm no one. That's really the whole moral code that we live by. We really trust people to work all that out for themselves. But I am going to be focusing more on this idea of how desire and passion inform our creative expression and our spirituality today. I was reminded of a trip I took years ago to Huntsville, Alabama. I was a musical guest and did a workshop there at the Center for Spiritual Living, and my friend David Leonard is the minister there. And there was a wonderful yoga teacher, spiritual teacher, who was also doing work in the community that weekend. I wish I could remember her name, and I can't, but she was doing a sort of a satsang and was doing a conversation, and I had been very interested in this idea of relational understanding of God, because really we believe in oneness, that we are one with God. Well, then how does this relational piece work? And I asked a question about this, and she had a great answer. She said, we speak so much about oneness that we forget how powerful two-ness is. And she reminded me of that beautiful passage in the Tao Te Ching that said, the Tao became the one became the two became the three, and the three became the 10,000. When the one becomes the two, we have been invited into the experience of relationship, connection, flow, becoming. She said it takes two banks of the river for it to flow forward. And so while our deepest truth is that we are one with all that is, we are a part of this one life of God, there is great power in exploring oneness through our two-ness. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. This is the framework I want to place this idea of Eros. And it's very philosophical. It's very kind of up here. So I'm going to tell you a story about it. How's that? I love to teach and learn through stories. And so the story I'm going to tell you today is the story of Eros and Psyche. This is one of the oldest romances in literature, at least 2,000 years old, possibly in oral tradition before then. Eros is the Greek god of desire and love and passion, romance. Psyche was immortal, of great beauty. The word psyche is the Greek word also used for soul. So lest you think that this is just a love story, the Greeks were very clear there is power in this teaching. We're talking about desire, Eros, and soul, Psyche. Psyche was the youngest of 3 daughters born to a great king, and she was known for her beauty from the earliest days of her life. Her sisters were also quite beautiful, but not as beautiful as Psyche. As she matured and grew, people were struck by her beauty, that they had never seen a human being as beautiful as this young princess. As they became of marrying age, her sisters found suitable husbands of noble birth and were well married. But Psyche could not find a mate, a match. And it was because her beauty was so profound that no one felt they could approach her. Her beauty was so magnificent that people mistook her sometimes for the goddess Aphrodite and worshiped her. How do you think Aphrodite felt about that? Here's the other thing about these Greek myths. Their gods are so human. I love them. They're jealous, they get mad, they get even. It's almost as if that these ancient Greeks were exploring their own humanity in these stories. You think? Maybe? Aphrodite was horribly jealous of the attention that Psyche received. And so she devised a plan to punish her for being so beautiful. Can you all relate? No, I'm just kidding. And she called her son Eros into her presence, the god of passionate love, who was a winged, beautiful god. And he had a magic bow and arrows. In Rome, in the Roman culture, he was Cupid. So it's appropriate. We're telling his story today. And these arrows that he shot were a magic. And if he pierced someone with the arrow, they would be hopelessly, passionately in love. And so Aphrodite said to her son, Eros, I want you to take one of your magic arrows and I want you to pierce Psyche so that causing her to fall in love with a horrible, monstrous creature. That will be her punishment for being so beautiful as to steal attention from my worshipers. And so Eros was a very obedient son. He said, yes, mother. Took his bow and arrow, and he went to find the beautiful maiden, the beautiful princess Psyche, and he found her. And it's said that as he began to take the arrow out of his quiver, he accidentally punctured himself with the arrow as he gazed upon the beautiful princess, and he fell hopelessly, deeply in love with Psyche. And so he could not condemn her to this fate. But something must have occurred in that moment because the love between Psyche and Eros was alive in the atmosphere. And again, no one would come forward to claim her hand in marriage. Her parents, the king and the queen, they were distraught the fact that they couldn't marry off this beautiful daughter. So they went to seek the oracle of Apollo and said, what do we do? What is the future for our Psyche? And the oracle said, she will marry, but not a mortal lover. And so the take that they took from it was not that she would marry a god, but that she would marry some monster. And it's not clear in the first telling of the story how this was their understanding, but they were deeply saddened. And they dressed Psyche in, one version says clothes for mourning, and another says clothes for a wedding. And one teacher that I was studying, he said he believed it was both. Because you see, if we're stepping into a story of transformation, as this story is, as true Eros loves, it must transform us. It is both a death and a beginning. A death to the former way of life, a birth into some magnificent connection that we have never yet known. And the oracle instructed them to take Psyche up to the top of a mountain crag and to tie her there. And this not human lover would come and claim her. And Eros was watching all of this from a distance. And he spoke to the god, the west wind, Zephyr. And he instructed Zephyr to lift Psyche from the mountainside and gently lower her to the hidden valley where Eros' palace was. And Zephyr laid her in a beautiful bed of flowers. Psyche rose unharmed, and she saw the palace and walked in. There were invisible servants that provided for her every need. And her first night there, she was visited by her new husband in the dark of night, the god Eros. Their marriage was consummated, and I'm not going to get, there we go. We're not going to go into that today, but you understand, right? Okay. And then, before the dawn, Eros said, we are now wed. You are my bride. I am your groom. All of your needs will always be met. You will be given a life of such blessing and comfort, grace and riches. But there is one rule. These stories always have a rule. You are never to gaze upon my face. And he left before the dawn. And he came back every night. She assumed that there must be something monstrous and hideous about him, but she only felt love and connection. You see, they had this bond of Eros love already. He was bound to her as she to him. But she wondered what he must look like. She asked Eros, her husband, if she could invite her sisters. She grew lonely for company that she could see. And he agreed, sort of grudgingly. And her sisters, they came and she described her life, and they looked around the palace and they were a little envious. But they said, he must be a hideous serpent or a monster for you to not be able to see his face. And they devised a plan. They said, what you should do is the next night he comes to you, light a lamp when he is asleep. And if indeed he is a monster, you take a knife and you kill him. And so the next opportunity came. After Eros had made love to Psyche, he fell into a deep sleep, and she took an oil lamp. She lit it with a knife in hand, and she beheld not a hideous monster, but the beautiful god, Eros. She was so shocked by his perfect appearance that she dropped some of the oil onto his face, and it awoke him, and he immediately saw what had happened, and he was angered that she had broken their agreement. And so he said, you will now be banished. You will never see me again. You have betrayed our love. One of the tellings of this story is that it was not a knife that she held, but one of his own arrows. And as she was about to reveal his face, she accidentally pierced herself with the arrow of Eros. And so she fell even more deeply and hopelessly in love with this God, just as their relationship ended. And she was banished from his presence. She wept bitterly. She began to search everywhere in the world for him. She beseeched all the gods to help her find her God, her Eros. She finally came to the temple of Aphrodite, and she knew that Aphrodite was not happy with her. Eros' mother, the goddess of love and beauty, but she beseeched Aphrodite for her aid. And Aphrodite was indeed angry with Psyche, not only for her great beauty, but for betraying her own son. But she said, as these stories often have, I will give you 4 tasks, and if you can complete these tasks, you will be reunited with my son. The first task, she had a great mound of seeds of mustard and wheat and barley and rye. And she said, if you can separate all of these different types of seeds into their own kind, by the end of the day, this task will be complete. And knowing it was impossible, but there was an ant nearby who heard of this and came to Psyche and said, let me help. And brought all the aunt, sisters, and cousins, and they separated the seeds, and by the end of the day, the task was complete. The next task was for her to go find a flock of vicious sheep. I know, it's just one of these stories. These vicious sheep that were dangerous, they would kill her, but they had the most beautiful, luxuriant golden wool. She was to gather the golden wool from these vicious sheep. And she came upon the herd, and she saw them, and she was about to approach them when she heard the voice coming from a green reed growing in the water. Like a musical song, the reed said, do not approach the sheep, for surely you will die. But if you wait until the sheep have eaten, they will fall asleep. And you will be able to gather their wool where they walked along the brambles, and you will gather the golden wool to present to Aphrodite, which she did. The third task, she was to fill a flask from the river Styx. She got there, she had no idea how to do it, and a great eagle came, took her flask and filled it and returned it to her. These tasks were being completed one by one, but the fourth was the greatest. She was charged by Aphrodite to walk into the underworld and find Persephone, the queen of the underworld, and ask Persephone for a box of her beauty. Psyche had no idea how to accomplish this task. She fretted. She despaired. She climbed to the top of a great tower and was prepared to fling herself off in despair. She'll never complete the task. She would never reunite with her Eros. And the tower itself came alive and spoke to her and gave her instructions and magical gifts on how to enter into the underworld, and how to approach Psyche and Persephone, which she did. As she received the box containing some of Persephone's beauty and was making her way back to the land of the living, she had been severely instructed to not open the box. This happened a lot in these stories too. Anytime there's a rule, you know somebody's going to break it. Anyone can relate? I'm a little bit like that. I have been in my life. And so Psyche had this box containing the beauty of Persephone, and she couldn't bear it. Her curiosity was too great, so she opened the box, and the box contained not the beauty of Persephone, but the spirit of sleep, eternal sleep. It was a trick from Aphrodite. And so Persephone was overtaken and went into a death-like sleep right there on the spot. Eros had been watching from a distance again. Even though he had banished his bride from his presence, the love was too strong. He could not separate. As a matter of fact, he was the one who spoke through the ant. He was the one who sang through the reed. He was the one who flew with the eagle and lived in the tower to give her these instructions. And upon the completion of her task, he was prepared to be reunited with her, and she had fallen into this death-like sleep. And he approached her, and he embraced her. And he took the sleep, which was like a mask upon her face, and placed it back in the box, and she awoken. And he took her to Mount Olympus, to Father Zeus, and he said, "This is my bride. This mortal is the one I choose to be with. Will you give us your leave to marry?" And Zeus, who knew all and had watched over all, saw the great love, the great passion of their courtship, of their marriage, of their separation and their reunification, the reunion. And he said, "Yes, you can marry, and not only that, I will transform Psyche from mortal to immortal. She will become a goddess." And isn't it a beautiful story? We are both parts of these lovers. We are the divine desire for expression, experience, and connection. We are the soul, beautiful and pure. As we experience love in this way, this passionate, creative fire in our lives, I invite us to consider how we may use this energy of Eros to bring our gift to the world, our creative passion. Howard Thurman, you've heard me use this quote so many times. He says, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, Eros, and go do that." What the world needs is people who have come alive. And I want to tell you, too, that just as there are many woundings in this story of transformation, those woundings are openings for the reunion of love and purpose, and that is true for us as well. One time, Oprah was interviewing Maya Angelou, and she just asked her the question, "Maya, why does the caged bird sing?" And Maya Angelou said to her, "Because she must." This is the last stanza from the poem, "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Your bondage, your wound, is the very place where your freedom becomes necessary and imminent. The trick here, the miracle in revealing Eros, passion, in your creative expression in life is to realize you are worthy. is to drop the idea that you cannot have your dream come true in this realm and recognize that you are created for exactly this moment. You don't have to be the Pulitzer Prize winning poet. You don't have to do that, but you must bring yourself fully alive into it. Marianne Williamson says this: "We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. And it's not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." I invite you to free yourself from your fear that you're not enough and offer yourself into your world, into your work, into your creative expression with passion, with faith. Hans Urs von Balthasar says this: what you are is God's gift to you. What you become is your gift to God. And finally, to close, I would like to invite us. All of these expressions of love and exploring these different Greek words, they're all invitations to find an inroad to a deeper experience of love in our life, in our spirituality, and to love God with this creative passion. As I mentioned, we are both psyche, the soul that is adored by divine desire, but we also are the soul that adores the divine. And sometimes in our teaching of oneness, we lose that bit of magic in our lives too. And we don't have to use the image of the divine that we were raised with. It doesn't have to be an old man with a white beard sitting